I'm about to change the way that you think about answering on-stage questions and how you prepare for them. My name is Dani. Thank you so much for clicking on this episode. I'm a former Miss Montana USA. Now I'm a pageant judge and a coach. Before you even start practicing for your onstage question, I would encourage you first to address any fears or limiting mindsets that you have surrounding onstage question. Many of the clients that I work with for the first time will share with me their fears in regards to public speaking or the onstage question competition. Whenever I hear that, I know that we can't even start practicing yet. We first have to change a contestant's mindset regarding onstage question. And in fact, there's actually 10 mindset shifts that I would really encourage you to apply for your next competition. And I share them all in this other episode that's very, very valuable. If you watched anything on the channel, I hope it would be that episode. The first mindset issue that I come across all the time is that contestants are turning a molehill into a mountain. If you feel like that's you, let me give you some assurances to help you change your perspective on this. There's a quote that I like to share with my clients, and that's, you don't win a pageant during onstage question, you lose it. What that essentially means is if you have the opportunity to share an onstage answer, you're probably in the top 5 or you've gone through some sort of cut, and that means that the judges already like you. Typically in those moments before contestants get asked an onstage question, judges already have a sense of who they think should win. And so essentially all they're waiting to see is if their personal favorite can get through the onstage answer without blanking out on stage or looking extremely stressed on stage. That's kind of it. If they like you at this point, they already like you, and not much is going to change that. And that is exactly why in many pageants, you can watch an onstage answer and think, gee, I like that contestant's answer more than I liked the winner's answer. Why didn't that other contestant win? At that point, judges are thinking about a contestant's overall performance at the end of that pageant, and that could go right back even into the interview room. That could have highly influenced them. So that's why you don't even have to have the quote unquote best onstage answer to win. So stop putting that pressure on yourself when you're preparing for your onstage question. Remember, at the end of the day, it's only about 30 seconds of your life. It's not a huge deal. Don't make it one. You've already gone through an interview process and been asked multiple questions. What's one more? Now let's get into some do's, don'ts, and strategies. One of the first things you're going to need to know, and you can ask your pageant director or your organization this question, is what types of questions will I be asked? Some pageants will ask you questions based off of current events or controversial issues. Others will ask you questions based off of only your paperwork, maybe your platform, or what we would call is just a generic pageant question like, why should we select you as our next title holder? It's important that you know what questions to prepare for so that you're not wasting your time with practice. If you're not going to get asked questions about current events, why would you study up on those in order to prepare for onstage question? One very important thing to consider when you're practicing onstage question is a time limit. Some pageants have a strict time limit, and typically you can ask your director what this time limit is. Generally speaking, this is about 30 seconds. That's a safe amount of time to prepare for. But there are systems like Miss Supranational where contestants in the top 12 only have 20 seconds to share their answers. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, versus other systems can allow up to a minute for your onstage answer. So when you're practicing and you start to get comfortable with your answers, I would encourage you to start timing your answers to make sure that you're not going over that 30-second time limit, because some systems will have a timer and they will cut you off at that 30-second mark, and you don't want that to be you. You want to make sure you share a complete answer. I'd like to address a really common question I get, and that is simply, should I memorize my answers? No, absolutely not. Oh my goodness, that's one of the worst things that you can do to prepare for a pageant, is to memorize your answers. Judges can tell when your answers are memorized. The other huge downside to memorizing answers is that it is impossible for you to memorize an answer to every question that could possibly be asked in the entire world. You don't want to be put in that situation where they ask you a question that you've never heard of, never prepared for, and now you blank out because you feel that you don't have anything to share. The reality is that you do have a lot of valuable information to share with the judges. So what you should do instead is focus on your personal branding points, the things that you want to make sure that the judges know about you before you walk off that stage. I would really encourage you to be stubborn with your messaging, but flexible in your methods of delivery. That is one of the keys of being able to master an onstage question. Another very common question I get is, how do I stop myself from rambling during an onstage question? I never know how to end my answer. Girl, I have been there too because I love to talk, I can relate, and I figured something out that can change your life. It's called a sandwich. Here's what you're gonna do from now on, and this will stop you from rambling. Whatever they ask you in the question, you're initially gonna give that straightforward answer. That is going to be the bread of your sandwich. Then you are going to provide evidence for why you believe whatever it is that you just shared. That is your content. That is the meat of your sandwich. Then you are going to finish it all up with another piece of bread, which all that is just a rephrasing of your initial point, your initial answer. That's all you have to do. That is a sandwich. Here's an example. Imagine you're asked the question, what quality should every leader possess? Here's how you can sandwich that answer. I believe that leaders should be encouragers. As the captain of my dance team, I make a conscious effort to let my teammates know when I see their improvements. I believe that a leader is somebody who encourages a positive environment and mindset, and that's why I believe an important quality to have for a leader is the ability to encourage others. So you notice with that answer, I started with encouragement, I told you why, I shared a little bit of information about myself, and then I finished by essentially just rephrasing, and that's why I think encouragement is important for leaders. Simple. It's the answer sandwich, and the judges are gonna eat it up. Next, we need to talk about answering questions directly. Some judges can be a stickler on that, and they're really looking for that. So you can lose points if you try to skirt your way around an answer. This is most common when we're talking about controversial questions or political questions. So what do you do if they put you in a box? I would always suggest to contestants to not just look for the black or white in a question, but maybe see if you can find that middle ground, see if there is some sort of compromise that can be reached. And if there is no compromise that can be reached in your answer, you should directly answer a question with your personal point of view, but with consideration for the other side and with personal perspective. That is what you need, and that is why many times you will hear title holders who have won huge titles say, well, like, as a YouTuber, my stance is, they're providing that personal perspective because the fact is that you don't know what judges are going to agree with you. You don't know their walks of life, and that's fine. You don't have to please everybody. You won't. But what's more important is that you share something about yourself, let them know where you're coming from and why you really believe what you believe. Because at the end of the day, that can't be wrong. Your personal experience is never wrong, even if the judges disagree with a conclusion that you've reached. One thing we should also address is body language, specifically with the microphone. General rule of thumb, if the microphone is offered to you by a host, then you can take it, but typically a host is not going to offer you a microphone, so don't fight with the host for it. You don't want to also kind of hold the mic with the host. That's really awkward for everyone. Typically what you're going to do is just know and decide where your hands are going to go ahead of time if you do end up in that top 5. Think about that in your prep. When I walk up in the top 5, Are my arms going to be at my side? Will they be hands on hips? Will I have one hand on hip? Will I talk with my hands? Will I place them in a hosting position? Figure out what that is ahead of time so you don't get up there on stage and suddenly you're like swinging an arm all over the place and you don't know what's going on and it's really distracting for everyone. You can avoid that scenario if you just practice a little bit. Another thing to think about for mics is if a host is holding it and they're holding it kind of low, don't bend down towards that mic. Instead, keep your posture and you can very gently raise that mic up. It won't be a huge deal. Now, if for some reason a host has it really close up in your face and you need a little bit of space, don't make a big deal about it. You can just pull that microphone down subtly and keep answering your question. Now, just because you have a microphone, remember that you still have to project a little bit so that everyone can hear you, but you also don't want to be shouting into the microphone. So we're not going to whisper and we're also not going to shout. Now let's talk eye contact. I do get questions about this. General rule of thumb for eye contact, if you can, make eye contact with the judges for 80% of your answer, and then I say about 20% with the audience. One thing you need to get in the habit of is listening to the question. I'm not saying to hear the question, I'm saying to listen and to fully comprehend what they just asked you. Now, if you didn't fully understand the question, you can ask for them to repeat it so you can hear it one more time. Give yourself a second to go, wait, what is it exactly that they're asking me? I have heard questions worded in unique ways that throw off contestants simply because the contestant did not take a moment to fully listen and truly understand what they were asking. So don't let that be you. Now, after you listen to the question, the next thing you want to do is take a quick pause. It's going to feel like an eternity. I assure you it will not be. Pause and think of almost like a draft of what your answer will be. Think about like the main point you want to get across and how you are going to get across to it. You want to kind of think of like, how am I opening and how am I going to be closing that answer before you start speaking. Another thing that I find very important is the use of personality. Oh my goodness. So many contestants, they let the nerves get the better of them and they lose all of their personality on stage. Now, an example of the opposite of this would be when Brooke Lee won Miss Universe.
I would eat everything in the world.
She had so much personality on stage. She was so likable. And in fact, I would say there's been quite a few other Miss USAs who answer their questions in such a relaxed way that you feel like you're just having a casual conversation with them, versus those who have been their runners up look and sound visibly nervous. And that's because they're not allowing themselves to have personality when they answer. And that is a conscious shift that I made between first runner up and winning Montana. When the host came up to me and kind of talked to me a little bit, asked me how I was doing, I had fun with the host. When the judges asked me that question, I kind of like took a moment, took that breath, and then I smiled while I spoke. And I did that because I knew there was nothing to be afraid of. I had confidence that I was already in the top 5. I had that belief in self. I believed that what I had done in that moment was already more than enough. I didn't feel like I had to impress anyone. I just felt like I had to get through that question in a way that was consistent with the rest of my performance that they had previously seen. At the end of the day, I feel like you can group winning on-stage answers into 3 categories. Category number 1 would be intelligence. A contestant can impress the audience and judges with articulation, vocabulary, the evidence that she provides. That's one way. The second way would be through authenticity. So maybe the way that she's answering her answer feels authentic to the judges. Maybe it's her tone, her facial expression, her volume. Maybe she shares some sort of very personal, real, or relatable information that wins them over. That could be one way to win. The third way I want to talk about is the combination of those 2 things. So if you have a contestant that's able to deliver an answer in a very authentic, heartfelt, sincere way, and she's able to incorporate evidence or vocabulary or articulation in her answer, if she can combine those things, typically, not only are the judges going to be impressed, but the audience is going to be impressed. And they will usually cheer for you. And I have seen in the past that just because an audience cheers for you, it's not a guarantee that you'll win, but there are many winners who have had the audience cheer. So it ends up being this common denominator. If you can get the audience to cheer for you during your onstage answer, if you can get them really rooting and behind you, then it's likely that that can also help to sway the judges in their final decision. While watching this episode, have you had any aha moments? Has anything surprised you? Have you been able to sort of see things a little bit differently? If so, drop a comment below. Let me know what changed for you after watching this episode. And if you want more tips, check out these other episodes that will also, I believe, be very helpful to you for your pageant preparation. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you real soon.